Welcome to The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. Here's your host, the biggest record nerd of them all, Nate Goyer.
Well, great googly moogly, everyone. Welcome to episode 537 of The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. And today, dear people, we welcome back to the podcast with open arms and a fridge full of beer, friend of the show, an absolute music, record, and Zappa nerd, Mr. Joe Vaultmeister Travers. Now, they call Joe the Vaultmeister because he's the guy that runs the vault that Frank Zappa stored all his tapes and stuff in. All the rare recordings, all the multi-track and master tapes, and there were so many. Frank, as we talk about today, loved to record all the time, and the Zappa Vault is absolutely chock-a-block filled with concert tapes, thousands of rehearsals, live shows, album masters, countless sonic treasures, and Frank also had lots of video, 35 millimeter film, 16 millimeter, various video formats. Frank was such a forward thinker. He tended to be on the bleeding edge of technology, which often led him down some very frustrating paths, which we'll talk about with Joe today. But luckily, Frank left the vault keys to the trusty hands of Joe, who's been mining lots of phenomenal recordings and putting them out in various box sets with themes like Halloween shows, various box sets of key albums and periods in Frank's creative life. And today, Joe and I talk deep about the 50th anniversary of Frank's 1975 tour with childhood and lifelong friend, Captain Beefheart. And this collaboration resulted in the album Bongo Fury. It's a fantastic single record, but many more times awesome on the new Bongo Fury 50th Anniversary Edition. There's a reissue of the remastered album. There are double record sets with the original album, as well as some interesting companion pieces. And what's pretty amazing is the 6 digital disc set with 5 CDs and 1 Blu-ray with the original LP in Dolby Atmos and some 48 unheard, unreleased tracks. This is an amazing box set, and there are many other great finds at Zappa.com. Go there, grab that Bongo Fury box set, grab more, grab it all, and then some. We all need more Frank Zappa in our life. You know that. That's just a fact, right? And, listeners to the show will know I absolutely love Frank and his work, and I'm absolutely honored to have been granted some time with Joe and many members of the Zappa family and universe. You can go back to some older episodes of the Vinyl Guide. We have some 500 episodes you can go through. Many of them are Zappa related. Of course, we've had Joe on a few times, Ahmet, Dweezil, Moon, lots of Zappa alumni, including Chester Thompson, Arthur Barrow, and of course, the late, great Ralph Humphrey. So you can get those in your podcast feed anytime. And by the way, I have an extended version of this interview only available to supporters of the show at patreon.com/vinylguide. So if you're a member of the patreon.com/vinylguide supporters, you get an extended version of this chat with Joe, and it's in a high resolution format. So if you like what you hear, please consider heading over to patreon.com/vinylguide, help support the show, and that would be friggin' amazing. Alrighty, enough of the chit-chat. Let's unlock the vault and unchain Mr. Joe Vaultmeister Travers and talk about Zappa, Beefheart, and Bongo Fury.
Nate, the Vinyl Guide.
Mr. Joe Vaultmeister, how are you?
Good to see you, man. Look at that fucking shirt. It's awesome.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. I just had Larry Mullins on the show, who you probably are very familiar with. And yep. We were talking about Stooges, as most conversations I have eventually get around to. And the debut album, he's heard recordings, the raw recordings of that first album, which, as you know, most songs are 3 minutes or whatever, and then they have fades. But those songs, there's actually like 12 and 14-minute versions of them.
Oh my gosh, why haven't they released that yet?
That's a fantastic question. Let's get someone from Rhino on the phone because
Yeah.
look, I'm sure again it's pretty hard slog some of that, but what they got in the studio, you know the story of how they recorded it. You know, they wrote most of the songs within 24 hours of that recording, and then
Yeah.
they just noodled around for 15 minutes while the tape ran, and then at the very end, John Cale said, "Okay, here's the usable 3 minutes."
Wow. Wow.
So it's stories like that are like, oh boy, the future. There, you know, I know sometimes the future looks quite bleak, but when I know out there's more Stooges I haven't heard and more Zappa I haven't heard, I'm like, okay,
yeah.
all right, the sun hasn't completely set on my dreams. You're part of it, man. Bongo Fury, I'm very, very keen to it. Bongo Fury has always been one of my favorite eras of Zappa, if that even is an era, one album kind of thing. 50th anniversary, 48 unheard tracks. Do I have my facts right there?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's really the heart of it is that concert unedited. You know, the Armadillo show. There's 2 shows there that the album was basically taken from. And so hearing that stuff, you know, unedited in its original sequence is pretty revealing and pretty great. And then, of course, there's some studio stuff and a little bit of some rehearsal footage, audio footage that was recorded during the very like right before the first show of that tour in Pomona, I believe, or Claremont. And they had set up shop at the place that they were playing in, like I think a couple days before the first show, and they rolled the 4-track on the 10th, which was the day before, and that's where we get to hear Portuguese Lunar Landing, which is a nugget and a half, that's for sure.
What? So now I know you've had so much experience. I mean, the most experience in Zappa tapes and archives as any other human has. How well did Frank keep his notes? Like, is it like piecing together? Oh, they played Claremont on this date, and is like how difficult or how challenging is that for the team?
Well, he didn't really. I mean, he did keep itineraries. So, like tour itineraries from the 70s and 80s exist in the vault. So that's super helpful in knowing where they were and when and all that stuff. On the tape boxes, there's not a whole lot of like production notes, you know, like track sheets inside. There would be a little bit of that, but not as much as you would hope. I think a lot of that stuff was done in his head and in real time. Just the production was just happening in real time for those records without a lot of documentation. So it's kind of just more revealing in what you hear as opposed to what you're seeing or reading. Mm-hmm. So yeah. I mean, it's still an unbelievable discovery session. Every time you start dipping into these tapes, you just never know what you're gonna get. It's pretty amazing, actually, sometimes when you think you're gonna hear something on a tape and then all of a sudden something else is there and you're like, whoa. And it's not even written on the tape box or something, you know?
By now, I would have assumed that you guys would have digitized most everything. Am I naive as to?
Yeah, not everything. I mean, I spent a lot of time as a one-man job for decades, you know, just kind of prioritizing things that Gail would have me working on. And so it was really hard for me to be like, okay, I'm going to take, 6 months and I'm going to do every single half-inch 4-track tour tape that's in the vault. Like I never had that kind of luxury because I was always kind of like prioritizing a bunch of stuff. But now it's different because I don't even really have the luxury of going in and picking any tape that I want at any time I want. It's now that Universal has the vault and stuff. It's very different. The process is very different. But it's actually, still as revealing and as before. It's just that the process is a little different. But yeah, the digitization of the assets has been ongoing for many, many years, and it still is. I mean, that's how much there is of that stuff.
Yeah. Now we're starting to, and we'll definitely talk Bongo Fury, but I'm fascinated because probably in the next several years, we're going to start entering the phase where Frank was mastering digitally instead of tape. How is that going to change what you do?
Well, it was tape. It was digital. There were two kinds of tapes that he was using. There was a machine called the Sony Dash 3324 tape machine, which had the capability of doing, CD quality, 44.1, 16-bit, 24 track, and then eventually it made it to 48K 24, or I think it was 24-bit, and then, but then there was also CDs were being mastered onto 3/4-inch U-matic digital videotape, basically. And Sony was also making those machines. They were called 1610 or 1630 machines. And so he was still, like doing multi-track recording and transferring all to a tape and then, mastering to a tape. It wasn't until his latest days in like 1991 or 2 or even 3, when I was there physically seeing that, Spence and Frank were working on a Mac, and inside that Mac, the hard drive was all of 1 gig. Mm-hmm. And so in order for them to be able to like have the room to do multiple projects, they had to dump all the mixes and all the audio off of the drive onto a tape so that they can make the room. So it was pretty amazing in today's world how, obviously with hard drive capacity, how much there is, of course, right? But back then, even in 1993, it was not like that. This tape was still dominating, and that's, Frank was just generating tape after tape after tape.
I remember back in the early 90s, I got my first 1 gigabyte hard drive, and it was a SCSI connector, and it was 1 gigabyte, and it fell off the back of a truck, and I got it for the bargain price of $450.
Oh, geez.
And connected that up with Sound Designer, pre-Pro Tools, and I was like, I could fit a whole CD on this and a little bit more. Frank, it's nice to know Frank was juggling with the same constraints.
He was.
Yeah.
He was.
Are there tapes or recordings or media in the vault or thereabouts that we still can't access? We have no idea what it's on and no idea how to extract the data from it.
No, the only thing that I think the only thing that the problem is that some of the backups of like synclavier data or sequences or any of that kind of stuff was backed up to whatever was state of the art at the time is way gone now. These cartridges that
zip disks.
No, it was before that. It was I forget what they're called now, but they're Kennedy drives or Kennedy backup tapes, I believe they're called. But there's there's also a primitive DAT storage medium that was used as well. So there's like these Kennedy tapes and these Weem DATs, I believe they're called Weem DATs. And there's like, you have to have the machine to get these things. Otherwise it's just and then of course, if the tape even plays after a certain amount of time, and that's the battle that we're up against right now when it comes to the tapes that I just talked about, the 3324 or 3348 or the 1630s, is that those tapes, not only are we up against the wall with them not living forever and need to be baked in order to be played, but also the machines that play that stuff is no longer in production. So if the machines go down, you're in trouble,
So I guess you have not only are you working with the projects like the 50th anniversaries and those sort of things that have that sort of time constraint, but you're also racing against the clock for tape decay and that sort of thing.
That's exactly right.
Oh.
And, the 1984 tour and the 1988 tours were all recorded on this digital format. And, you know, not all of that stuff is living on hard drives. They haven't all been transferred to WAV files yet. So it's an ongoing thing. And I really am trying to prioritize getting as much of that, you know, migrated as possible. That's kind of the big issue when it comes to a living, breathing archive like Frank's, is trying to keep all of that data relevant in with technology to keep it you know, living, to keep it available. It's hard to, you know, to back all that stuff up. It costs a lot of money, and he was obviously so prolific. So it is definitely a chore, and an expensive one at that, to keep, you know, trying to get this stuff migrated over the years.
Yeah. Have you had a tape that's just broke your heart? Something that couldn't be salvaged, something that unraveled, it couldn't be. Yeah.
I mean, it's most of the time when that happens, there's always like a safety or another version of it, thank God. But like, oh my God, I had such problems with the 1630 tapes when in 2012, you know, we did a full remaster campaign on Zappa, and most of the titles we went back to the original analog tapes and remastered. But on the ones that we didn't do that, I wanted to get fresh transfers off of those 1630 tapes, and I had to bake them in order to play them all. And the machine broke down at least 2 times. I had to send the machines that we had. We had multiples, but when the main one would go down, what it did is, when you put the tape inside the machine, there's this bar that grabs the tape and pulls it around the head. There's this big swirling video head, and it pulls it around the head, and then it starts to play, and this thing is swirling like crazy. And then when you press eject, that bar will pull that tape back around the head like this and back into the tape. Well, if there was any kind of sticky syndrome whatsoever on that tape, or let's say that I baked it and then halfway through the tape, it just got sticky and I didn't know, it starts to squeal and the tension goes crazy. So you have to stop it, and you're going to have to rebake it. But if by any chance this is my nightmare. We would get so far into it. I would get so far into it that when you would press stop and you press eject and that bar goes to pull that tape around, the tape would be stuck. So the bar would move, but the tape would stay, and it would just flop inside the machine and get caught in all of the things in there. And then the bar would lose its timing. So then, because there's like a timing thing on it. And so the tension would get all screwed up. The whole machine would go crazy. And the tape would get ruined. You would have to cut the tape in order to get it out, caught in between all the stuff in there. So it was just like, oh my God. I used to watch that happen, and just, you know, I would pray and say, thank you that there's a backup of this, but goddamn. This tape is dead. It just died on me, you know? Oh, God.
Oh, Jesus. All right. So we'll leave those heartache moments behind for
those were tough days.
I imagine. Yeah. So let's talk Bongo Fury. Now, Frank and Don, or the captain, they were friends in their youth. What do we know about their early days together?
Yeah, I don't know exactly. I think they were high school. They met in high school. And they shared same interests. They were both into the same kind of music. They both were extremely intelligent and funny. And they were both pretty poor. They would spend their time spinning Howlin' Wolf records and eating leftover bakery items from the Beefheart's dad's business,
Oh, he drove a bread truck, I think.
Yeah. And, they had the similar friends. And so they were hanging out together a lot. And what's interesting is that Beefheart and Frank, all throughout Frank's earliest years before he was signed, Beefheart was there the whole time. Like all those Studio Z days when he took over Pal Studios and all that stuff. Like Beefheart was there. All those, working, recording music with Frank there. Had the same friends, Motorhead and Kenny and Ronnie Williams, Ray Collins, all those people that were, kind of like in the close circle. Vic Mortensen, it's just Don was there for all of it. And so, yeah, they just clicked early on.
Is this Kenny and his buddies had a game out in the back? Same Kenny? Okay.
Kenny and Ronnie Williams, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And I believe Captain Beefheart, he got his name from Frank. We don't need to go into too many details, but I don't know if there's a PG-13 way of being able to talk about how that happened, but
yeah. Yeah, that's hilarious, that story. But yeah, I mean, what a way to get a name.
Were they working on a film? I think, was it Captain Beefheart versus the Grunt People?
Versus the Grunt People, yeah. And then they had a band together called the Soots, spelled Soots, which recorded like 3 songs, and it was, some of it has been released. Tiger Roach was one, and they did a couple covers. They did a cover of Howlin' Wolf's Evil, and they did Slippin' and Slidin'. Yeah, and those tapes are in the vault. They sound great.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Those are those available anywhere?
No.
Okay.
Nope. Tiger Roach is. That's on the Lost Episodes, but the other covers have yet to be heard.
Okay. Any plans for those?
I'd love to.
Okay. All
yeah,
right.
I'd love to.
I would think that the Bongo Fury box set may be an appropriate kind of landing spot for those, but I guess not.
Well, yeah, but the acquisition with Universal, they didn't. There's things they got and things they didn't get. And Ahmed has a lot of stuff, or the Zappa Trust still has stuff. So it's like an ongoing thing. But if the interest is there, it really would be nice. I've always wanted to do a large scale. Comprehensive Zappa Beefheart document, something that showcased their relationship from the earliest days to the end days. So that was always something I wanted to do.
Oh, fast! And there's sounds like there's quite a bit of material. Would this be a multi-disc venture?
Well, it would have been. There would have been a lot of like the early recordings that I just mentioned. Maybe the Trout Mask era stuff, and then obviously Bongo Fury era stuff, and things like that. Yeah, there's a really great. I mean, Frank was recording a lot of great things all the time, and Don, he appreciated Don's talents and what how special Don was, and so he was definitely like documenting that stuff, especially in 1969 when Beefheart would be coming over to the house and bringing his band members, and they'd be barnstorming ideas about like what the packaging of Trout Mask, and and like poetry readings and just really great recordings, all really cool historical things between those two guys. So yeah.
Did the relationship of Frank and the Captain was that in a maybe a healthy spot in the early releases, Freak Out or Safe as Milk?
That's interesting because they were like they weren't. Yeah, I'm gonna say yes, but at that time during Freak Out and Safe as Milk and Strictly Personal and like the early like the 60s up until 69, I have a feeling that they were both pretty busy carving out their own niche, their own thing. And then in 69, they kind of what I said in my liner notes is that they kind of like re-entered each other's orbits. And with Trout Mask and Hot Rats, obviously there was like some collaborations happening there. And then things got weird again. Beefheart was saying weird things about Frank in the press about, the production of and how he was being presented as, I guess he had like issues with how he was being presented as some weird act on this label instead of being appreciated for what he, had to offer, I guess, or something. But then, of course, comes 1975, and again, Beefheart's in a situation where he was backed up against the wall contractually in the business and needed help, and he couldn't work, and he needed, he couldn't make money. So Frank helped him out, him and Herb helped him out again, and that also happened in '69. That kind of help, and so that's what kind of spearheaded the whole. There was no real like Bongo Fury oh, let's do an album called Bongo Fury. Like that wasn't even like that was an after. I think it was an afterthought after the tour. Really, what happened was Beefheart needed help. Frank came to his aid by saying, "Hey, why don't you join the band? Go on the road. You can make some money with us, and we'll write some music together. We'll do some stuff. We'll see how it goes." And it was short lived, but it was still really, a cool thing to happen. And then the album was kind of like, the the culmination of that idea. Let's get Beefheart in the band.
Yeah. Now during this tour, obviously, yeah, it wasn't Bongo Fury tour. I mean, I suppose they just got the name of the album from Captain Beefheart constantly saying that in Deborah Cadabra or whatever.
Yeah. It was just like, just the typical folklore stuff that was happening. And it was perfect. It was perfect.
Do we know if the captain, was he billed separately? Was he Frank Zappa and Captain Beefheart? Was he just part of the band? What do we know about?
He was just part of the band.
Okay.
Yeah, he was just, the tour was Zappa Mothers. Mm-hmm. And, and maybe there could have been handbills, or the promoters could have been saying special guest, Beefheart or something like that. But Frank was doing interviews to promote the tour, saying that Beefheart was a band member, and then how he got in and how it all led to him being a part of it,
Would Beefheart have been a draw back then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so, because he had already done, he had already established himself big time as a solo artist. So he had his own audience. But, I think that Zappa's audience and Beefheart audience always kind of cross-pollinated, I think. They just talk to each other. It just seems to be. They get lumped in together. But it makes sense,
Yeah. Yeah. The weird kids at school. You got to, it's safety in numbers. So did they get along well on the tour? Do we know about their interaction?
They got along pretty good in the beginning, and then it got stressful. Beefheart was really kind of hard to manage on the road, and it was a little tough. And also, Beefheart was unpredictable. He was inconsistent with his performance, and that's not to say that he was bad. It's just that Frank was used to perfect execution, as mistake free as possible, and with Beefheart it was a roll of the dice. You didn't know if he was going to remember the lyrics in the right sequence. He was carrying his shit around in brown paper bags that had his harmonica and lyrics in there, and just like, I'm sure he was extremely funny and witty and a character, but he would sit on stage and sketch whenever he wasn't performing. And after a while, it was, I'm sure that it was a little tough on Frank. But I do know that even if reports say that they weren't talking by the end of the tour or something like that, they obviously were, because they were back in the studio working together when the tour was over, because Frank was working on that album, and Beefheart was coming in and doing overdub vocals. And so it was, it's hard to say. I think the people around them would know more. I'm obviously I'm just remembering what I've read or what I've heard. But as much tension as there may have been on the road, it didn't seem like it affected them after it was over with. They were still in the studio, as you can hear on the box, because there's a song on there called "Born to Suck." And it's basically just a riff of them singing over top of the guitar solo from Florentine Pogan. But it's like Frank grabbed the engineers and went into the studio. And then all of a sudden, Don shows up and he goes, "Is that Don? Send him in." And so then immediately, Don is thrust into improvising over this thing, playing harmonica and singing. And, it's like they sound like they're having the best time. It's so great,
So talk to us about some of the recordings on the box, because there's a complete live gig. Were the shows pretty consistent? Did they do kind of the same show or the same set list, or was that
fairly much? They changed it up from a little bit from show to show. There's some songs that they played in one show that they didn't play in the other, which is cool. They didn't play every single song that was being featured on that tour. There's some songs that didn't get played at all. But yeah, it's a good sounding document. It's 16 track 2-inch tape, and there were two full shows recorded, and so that's really cool. And then you have the Bob Ludwig remaster from 2012 of that album, and then you have some of the other works in progress, like there's some rough mixes, some longer versions, some longer edits of songs like 200 Years Old or Carolina Hardcore Ecstasy. You know, Frank released like played acetates of some of those long versions on the radio, and that's how they kind of got out there into the collector circles. But now we're finally going to get them, in great quality from the tapes. And he had to cut that stuff down because the album lengths back then, 20 minutes is you're pushing it. And so he needed to, in order to fit the full vision, he had to cut some of those songs down. But now we get the full length stuff. We get some rehearsals in there. We get a little bit of outtakes, things that we never even knew existed, from around that time.
Like
Born
what?
to Suck being one of them. Born to Suck. Yeah. And the Born to Suck thing is great because you hear the track that they were working on, but then you also have this, what Frank used to call Snoop tapes, which would be just a tape rolling, capturing documentary style the banter and everything that's going on as they're recording. So you can hear, them only just their tracks as they're recording it, and then the laughing and the things they're saying, and then Beefheart coming in and the things that they're saying. It's just really great because it gives you that fly on the wall experience that a lot of hardcores would really appreciate.
What Zappa recorded so much, and not just music, but like you say, the Snoop tapes. It seemed like he'd always have a go. What do you make of that? Someone who's constantly capturing that information.
That's the thing. It's like he somehow knew that it was important to constantly document. I just really feel like it was a priority for him all the time. He was capturing the personalities of the people that he was working with. He got enjoyment out of the jokes, the folklore, the characters, the camaraderie between those people, Flo and Eddie, and all through the years, all the different people, and the early mothers, and then sometimes too, if you're capturing that stuff, it can jumpstart ideas for other things. So there may be something that Lowell George says when he's recording the backup parts to WPLJ in the studio that makes Frank laugh and spearheads some other song, and he has it on tape so he won't forget it, So kind of things like that.
Was it Ralph's shoes kind of thing? Was that could have?
Well, Ralph stuffs his shoes was the first the joke, and then of course that turned into, can't afford no shoes. So
yeah, okay, so a lot of his ideas may have germinated from those just passerby commentary. And I guess it's just interesting that someone would record all that, go through that effort, and then re-listen and almost preserve. It's an investment in a chance that may or may not happen.
Yeah, and it's really amazing how much Frank remembered too. Like, it's really great how the memories that those tapes captured, how he remembered that. And he'd always, like in interviews, like years later, he'd be like, oh yeah, there's a tape of that. Like he would know, he'd be like, oh yeah, there's a tape of that. So, somewhere in the vault, I've got that somewhere, like.
So did Captain and Frank have any plans after the tour, after those initial recordings? Was there an ambition to do more together?
Ooh, I don't think so. I think it ran its course pretty quick. Yeah, no, after the tour was done, in the summertime of 75, Frank started experimenting with a different lineup. He had Novog on viola and keyboards. He had Froggy, Robert Camarena, I believe that's how you say his name. He was singing, and Napoleon and Denny Wally and Terry, and they were kind of toying around with the idea of a group. They even took promo pictures, and then it didn't happen. Novi bailed, Denny bailed, and then it just turned into a really stripped down band that lasted for almost a year. there was a lot of different personnel changes happening between after Bongo Fury and before Ray White joined the band. There was a lot of experimentation happening with people. You know, there were like other keyboard players. Ralph Armstrong from the Mahavishnu Orchestra was kind of jamming with them a little bit. And Eddie Jobson was jamming with them a little bit during 75. Norma Bell was in and out. There was a bunch of different things happening. It was a weird time for Frank, actually. But yeah.
Was this what precipitated, whatever, came before Zoot Allures? He just landed on that lineup and said, okay, let's simplify.
Well, yeah, so there was basically this lineup that I was telling you about with Roy Estrada on bass, and it was like a stripped down thing. By the time the European tour in early 1976 came to an end, it was really dark in Frank's world because of the situation with Herb Cohen.
Yeah.
So he literally canceled gigs at the end of that tour. All the Spanish gigs got canceled. He went home early. He was pissed. You know, there was a fallout with him and Herb. He didn't have management. You know, there was he wasn't even really sure what was going to happen. But what he did do is just go to the record plant. He went to the record plant and just set up sessions and said, okay, Terry, it's just you and me. And so it was Terry and him, and they started what ended up becoming Zoot Allures. But yeah, it was a dark time.
Oh, this was the Bongo Fury tour was Terry's first outing with Frank. Is that right?
Yes, and that was basically a year before what I just said. So it was March. It was in March, late March, that Terry joined, and they started rehearsals with Beefheart. And it was in March and April of 76, I'm pretty sure, that the Zoot Allures sessions started up.
So he had at that point built up a very strong camaraderie with Terry. I mean, that would have been,
yes,
like a
definitely
musical partnership almost at that point.
Yeah, everybody left the band and it was just Terry and him. And Terry brought in Patrick O'Hearn, which was really cool. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it was a weird time. Terry was saying that at one point Frank was like, I don't even know if I can pay you. I don't know what we're going to do. And Terry was just like, don't worry, we're going to be here for you, whatever. And then it ended up that they did get management. They got Bennett Glotzer, and, obviously touring did get booked. And, late 76 and all through 77, it was tough because they were, he was having problems with Warner Brothers, and all that stuff. So it was crazy. But yeah.
What do we know about Frank and the Captain's correspondence or relationship in their later years? Did they stay in contact?
Good. It was good, actually, which I'm really happy to know. I'm really happy to hear because I'm happy to hear that during Frank's, last months even, Beefheart would call him and they would be on the phone, at least an hour every time that he would call. And it was really gracious of Frank to give Don that kind of time, especially at that time in his life when he's working nonstop and, and he's ill and he's on borrowed time and, he's got a full staff of people and, he's got people coming in and out of his door to come and see him because, it's just crazy. And I know because Matt Groening told me that story that Matt Groening walked into the studio to see Frank and Frank was on the phone and it went like this. It was Matt sitting there listening to the end of the conversation, and all it was, yeah, right, That's all Frank was saying, because Beefheart would just never
dominate the conversation,
never stop talking. So then when he said, okay, I'll talk to you next week, and he hangs up, and he goes, and Matt was like, who was that? He goes, that was Don. He's like, whenever he calls, it's a guaranteed hour. So great. So anyway, but again, it's great that those two were still, cool with each other, especially during those times.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's nice to know. But yeah, again, that album and Bongo Fury is always. Well, I've always loved it. but I felt it was a bit of a secret for me because I didn't hear a lot of people talking about Bongo Fury. Was it well received when it first came out?
I think after the Roxy and Elsewhere album came out, which was late 74, which was the follow-up to Apostrophe, which did so well. I think that when One Size Fits All came out, it was the beginning of the days where Warner's just decided that they weren't going to put behind Frank the promotion and the time, which was really disappointing because I think they were expecting I think they were trying to have Frank do whatever they wanted, that whatever their agenda was, and because they're all about money, and Frank is going to do what he wants to do. So I have a feeling that like once 75 came around and One Size Fits All and Bongo Fury, all that stuff kind of got overlooked, which is such a bummer because they're so great, but they just didn't get the support, and they should have. And even Zoot Allures, when Zoot Allures came out, there was weirdness with Warner Brothers. He wanted to do a 2 LP version, and I'm pretty sure that they made him cut it down to 1, and they took him off of the Discreet label and stuck him on the regular Warner Brothers label. So there was all this weird record company stuff happening, in the midst of management stuff and band stuff and just the typical crap that Frank had to deal with for, off and on throughout his career. And so, it's the point is that Bongo Fury probably got overlooked just like One Size Fits All did.
Mm-hmm. With Sleep Dirt, Studio Tan, those are the albums that are kind of chopped up leather. How are those albums seen by the Zappa team at this point?
Well, they're as important as everything else. I think they're wonderful records. The music, the content is some of the greatest stuff. I mean, Frank called The Adventures of Gregory Peccary a masterpiece, and it is. Those records are fantastic. The original plans for those records would have had much more impact, but the fact that he just turned them in to fulfill a contract and then have the record company completely ignore him when it came time to release that stuff. They assigned an artist that he didn't commission and did artwork that he would have never said yes to. There was no liner notes to those records. They didn't even have the proper tones to align the tape machines when they did it, like on some of it. So, they just were just thrown out there. And there was no support for those records whatsoever. But when you look back on it, the content is just as good as any of the stuff that was happening in the 70s. So,
but when I listen to it now, I listen to Lather, and to me, that's the proper perspective. Gregory Peccary just kind of seems odd. I think, is it on Studio Tan?
Studio Tan, yeah.
But in the context of Lather, it's like, okay, this actually makes more sense. So, and I know Zappa Family Trust or the team has put out a blessed version of Lather, but Sleep Dirt, Studio Tan, it just seems almost like a compilation from some far off land that may or may not be respected, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's just I think that their time is coming. Personally, that's how I feel about that, because those records were released in 78, 79, so we're approaching the 50th anniversary of when that stuff came out, and they do deserve a spotlight, just like Orchestral Favorites deserved it for its 40th. So for the 50th, who knows? Maybe we'll put Studio Tan and Sleep Dirt in the light. There's many things that we could do. I know there's a lot of great stuff in the vault pertaining to the content of those records, so we could do some great things. And they deserve to be lifted and put on a pedestal, and maybe get the recognition that they missed out on all these years. Obviously, when CD came around, Frank kept the cover art because he just didn't want to deal with it. But he did remix a lot of that stuff and tried to put time in to make the versions that came out on CD in the 90s to be unique to an audience that probably bought it all already back in the 70s. So he really did work a lot with that stuff in his time. But Yeah, those records are just to me. To me, those records are just as important as Waka Jawaka, the Grand Wazoo, stuff like that. They're just as good.
Mm-hmm. I I really love what the Zappa family's been doing with these reissues. Is it still the Zappa Family Trust, or is it evolved to something?
Yeah, there's still a trust.
Okay.
Yeah, there's still a trust. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Because these box sets, I would imagine, Frank's vision for all these recordings that he did for so many years, recording every show and being as detailed as he was, I would imagine the sort of box sets and the sort of volumes that are being created out of this are probably something that he would have liked to have done, but was just, constrained at the time through technology. Is that fair?
Oh, we could talk about that for a long time. I mean, I feel like when it comes to box set mentality, okay, Frank was thinking about box sets before the industry was even ready to even deal with the possibility of box sets. Mm-hmm. He was thinking about subscription services at a time when there was no such thing. This is very typical of Frank. So, yes, I think that box sets were definitely on his mind, but there was no room for it in the industry at the time when he was thinking about it in the 70s. And now everybody's doing box sets, but the content of the box sets, is going to be up for debate as far as whether or not Frank would like it. And here's what I mean, because we know that he didn't ever think that the live shows, a full live show, was worthy of release no matter what. He always felt like there was going to be something wrong somewhere, and that would just prohibit the release of a full show. The closest that he ever did come to like a full show release was You Can't Do That on Stage Anymore, Volume 2, the Helsinki concert, and then also Ahead of Their Time. And those aren't even full shows. Those are taken from, the same tapes, but they're edited. But it's the closest that he came to releasing, full concerts. He just was never really was interested in doing that, it seemed. But we know now that there's a market for these types of things. People were at those shows. People have the collector mentality where they really want to hear it. They may not even hear the mistakes that Frank hears. Therefore, their appreciation of those bands and those times and those songs and those performances are coming from a different place than he is. Mm-hmm. He's super critical, and they just get the enjoyment out of it. And I'm a fan, and I love hearing the stuff that's on these things. So I think that we're catering to a certain demographic with these box sets, in that we're not the only artists doing it. I think a lot of people have been doing box sets like this now for a long time. Catalog artists are dipping into their stuff, and some catalog artists have a lot more to choose from than others. The Dead obviously have done some wonderful shit for decades now with their Dick's Picks and all the different things that they've done. So the Zappa audience has proven over time that it's worthy for us to do these types of things. And it also, in return, celebrates these works by the man and puts a spotlight on them that maybe it might not have gotten in the past, or just it gives it a new light in today's day and age with a new audience. Like, yes, we know that Apostrophe was great, but check out how great it is, and we're going to give you all this extra stuff too in case you want to rebuy it again and check it out again, or remaster it again or whatever. Like, it's just kind of like part of the business ethic, and I think it's working. I know it's working. I know Universal's happy. And for me, I'm really excited to be able to unearth the things that I'm finding per these, when we're talking about just the anniversaries. It's so fun to see all the different work tapes and all the different works in progress that, that show off Frank's work ethic and how this stuff came together. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's not just showing them in a new light. It could be the first light. I mean, cheaper than cheap.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, of course. Yes. Well, that's a gift, literally. It's like, who would have known that footage even existed? Like, it just sat in the vault for decades. It's crazy.
So, okay, and for listeners who may not know what we're talking about, cheaper than cheap, this was a made-for-TV it was a project where Frank filmed the band in '74. This was not long after Roxy and Elsewhere was filmed, and that was kind of fucked up because the synchronization issues. He had 2 video projects within 12 months of one another that suffered from the same issue.
Absolutely. Yeah, which had to have been just completely frustrating for him, because he was it seemed as if he was so hell-bent on doing something for TV. Like he really wanted to do something for TV. I mean, it makes sense because at that time, even in late 73, there were so many great television shows that were showcasing music in the evenings. You had Midnight Special, you had Don Kirshner's Rock Concert, you had ABC's In Concert, you had all these different, obviously American Bandstand, like you had all these things that were showing off. And so in order to get that kind of media attention, you have to, he wanted to create something on his own terms. Mm-hmm. So the Roxy ends up being tainted, and then this shoot ends up being tainted, and the footage, he won it back in a lawsuit, and it sat in the vault because there was no way that he was going to be able to sync that stuff with the tools that were available at the time. And then he got his successful TV shoot 2 months later when the KCET stuff was shot, the Token of His Extreme Dubrum special stuff that, he finally got it, right? So he finally got it, and the stuff that was cheaper than cheap ended up just being, he never really went back to it. I don't know how he felt about it. He might have felt like it was just, none of it was worth it. But now, in our day and age, it's like, oh my God, this is a gold mine of footage that existed that we never even knew existed.
That was been the biggest holy shit moment. It's like, oh, geez, when did you become aware of Cheaper Than Cheap video?
Well, I saw the 1-inch Video Masters in the vault. No, 2-inch Video Masters in the vault, and I saw the tapes, the 16-track 2-inch tapes. But there wasn't any documentation on the boxes that said what it was. Like, it didn't say TV special. It just had the name of the company that shot it, and the tapes had the names of the songs that were on the side of the spine and the date. That was it. So there was no inkling from a young Vaultmeister who didn't really know about the shoot. There was no inkling of knowing what the hell that was, and I didn't have the machine to play those tapes back because there were sync tracks on it. And when there's a sync track on it, that means that there needs to be a special connection from the tape machine to something, wherever it's going, to keep the tape machine resolved so that it's playing at a certain speed, because then it's going to match the picture.
The SMPTE?
Yeah, it's like, yes, exactly, a SMPTE. And the thing is that even though the SMPTE was recorded to the audio tape, it wasn't connected to the video truck in real time. That's why they both were recorded wild. They were recorded separately. They weren't connected, which they thought they were connected in real time when it was being done. And then after the fact, they were like, oops, someone didn't connect this cable. So in other words, the audio tapes, when transferred, when digitized, that machine needed to be resolved so that it would be easier to match the picture later on, even digitally. So I didn't have that capability. So for friggin' years, those things just sat on. I didn't know what it was. And it wasn't until later, sorry, I keep rambling, but it wasn't until later that Gail decided, you know what, let's just get like 1 or 2 of these video reels transferred and see what the hell this is. Because I kept telling her, I don't know what this is, but this could be something really good. There's a lot of tapes here with this date. And then we saw like the 2 reels that we did just on a small budget, and we were both like, ooh, this is going to be awesome. And then, of course, we never got to it, because it was an expensive venture. Gail never really had the time or the money to do it. And it wasn't until, Universal came into the picture that we actually, between Amit and myself and the editors and the budget and everything, we finally were able to do it.
Do we know if either Cheaper Than Cheap or Roxy video. Do we know if Frank, towards the end of his life, did he know that at some point technology was going to catch up and allow some useful outcomes of those?
My guess is yes, but unfortunately, digital audio workstations were, coming around. Like I told you, he was using a Sonic Solution system at that point, which was a beautiful system. It was a digital audio workstation, but he was only doing audio. He wasn't doing video yet. And so it wasn't until, let me think now, sometime in the 90s, like late 90s, like 97, 98, 99, in that era. That was when Van Carlson, who was Frank's videographer, when he was finally coming to the house and syncing the Roxy footage for the first time. That was the first time. Now, the farthest that Frank ever got to working with the Roxy footage and trying to get it working was that he transferred everything, video, the film, to 1-inch video, which was state of the art in the 80s. And then he mixed all of that audio digitally, but he could not get them to talk to each other. Even in the 80s with the video technology available, he still couldn't get it to work. So the first time that it actually did get in sync was in the late 90s, and then it had to be resunk again for the movie project that we did in 2014 or 15. So yeah, I mean, Frank he just didn't have the technology on his side, but his head was there.
Oh yeah.
He knew what had to be done. He just didn't have the tools to do it.
Oh, this is phenomenal. Joe, I learned so much every time I talk to you, and I'm such a fan, and I can't wait, because I'm seeing over the next few years Zoot Allures. I'm seeing Joe's Garage. I'm seeing You Are What You Is, and even Chic Your Booty. I think we're on the precipice of this phenomenal mountain of incredible material, and I know you know most of what's in there, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what's next. Is there anything you could tease?
Well, this year, oh man, there is some things that I am so excited about, and I don't really want to blow it. I don't want to. I don't want Universal to come back at me and be angry because I dropped the ball on stuff that's not announced, but we do have some more Atmos things that are in the works, which is great, which means we're working on special editions, which is great. And then we also have, oh God, I don't, I'll tell you what, in about a month or so, come back at me and we'll do it again, because we have a big announcement coming. So,
oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to make sure people are all aware of this. Zappa.com, of course, and Bongo Fury. There's is it 6 CDs and a Blu-ray?
I think it's 5 and a Blu-ray.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and then reissued on vinyl again. Yep.
Of course. And look,
vinyl is king. Look behind you.
I know vinyl is king, but I want to hear I'm actually looking for a really nice CD player, Joe, because of Zappa is a perfect reason why. There's a lot of material that you just can't get on a record sometimes. And so being able to have access to that, it's
I agree.
Yeah, it's not a religious war here.
Yeah, I like to stream. I have a high res streamer in my apartment, and I listen to streaming, but it doesn't compare to CD yet. It just doesn't. I mean, it sounds very good if you're doing high res streaming from some of these services and stuff, but CD, when done right, still is great. And it's it may not be like the be all. It may not be the go-to format these days, and I know that vinyl is revered and for good reason and all that stuff, but when CD is done right, it's still extremely effective. It's a great experience, and so I'm with you on that.
Yeah, because some of these box sets you do would be, if you put them on vinyl, I mean, it would be
it's too expensive and it's too much.
Exactly. So things like Zappa Eerie, the one size fits all box,
Yeah.
There's all sorts of stuff. Cheaper Than Cheap, of course.
Yeah.
And
The Apostrophe box, Overnight Sensation, Waka Wazoo, like all these box sets, to be able to hear the Atmos remixes is really cool too. Or maybe some people don't have that capability, and that's cool. But if you do, even if you have 5.1, it's still neat to hear these new kind of. New is a bad word because it sounds like we had an agenda. I mean, we're really sticking with what Frank wanted, really. But it's just great to hear the clarity from the original tapes of the tracks and the spatial, the immersive, kind of effect. It's pretty great.
Yeah. Joe, always a pleasure, mate. Again, I'm going to remind everyone, Bongo Fury, there's multiple formats. Of course, you pick up the vinyl. There's a special double vinyl with some extras on it. And of course, the original remastered album. And then there's that multi-CD box set with the Blu-ray of Atmos Surround. And again, pick up Cheaper Than Cheap. Pick up all the Zappa CD box sets or LPs if you can. It's always great to be able to revisit those. And again, Joe, you're doing God's work. Thanks again, Nate.
Thank you so much. And keep in touch, Nate, please.
Will do. Oh, man, Joe is just brilliant. I really enjoy those conversations and hope to tee another one up soon. Sounds like they're cooking up some really good stuff over there. So, again, Bongo Fury 50th Anniversary Box Set, Zappa.com. There's a whole bunch of great other releases there. Go over there, grab a bunch of their box sets. You won't be sorry. And that's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks to everyone who's sharing these episodes on social media, Reddit forums, Facebook groups. That is hugely appreciated. And those of you who are sponsoring us at patreon.com/vinyl guide, well, I love you too. Now, we'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, you all behave yourselves. And thanks again for listening to the Vinyl Guide podcast. Cheers.